Welcome to NC Exclusive here on News Central Television. My guest today is from the eastern part of the continent. Born in May 1982, he is a politician, currently the Senator of Nairobi County and the Secretary General of ODM, which stands for Orange Democratic Movement Party, all the way from Kenya. Thank you so much for joining me, Senator Edwin Watenya Sifuna.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Before we delve into the topical issues, let me ask first off, at what age did you veer into politics?
Oh, well, I first ran in 2017 elections, so I was about 35 years then.
25?
35.
35, I see. Okay, not a bad one, not a bad age to begin being a politician, but we'll come back to that discussion. Let's now go straight to the major issue that's indeed making the rounds in your country, Kenya. Now, Mr. Sifuna, your country is actually going through a state of unrest through mass demonstrations introduced by your party, ODM. Now, what are the agitations? What are people really asking for?
Well, first, let me correct you there. It is not ODM that instigated the current mass action. It was instigated by the Azimio la Umoja coalition, which is a coalition that incorporates almost 26 political parties in Kenya, and yes, ODM is one of them. We have had various engagements across the country with the people. We had set out a few issues that we thought that the current regime would be able to address. First of all, after the election, it emerged through a whistleblower's account that, in fact, William Ruto did not win the elections of 2022. And therefore, one of the key agitations was that now that we have this new information that was not available to us at the point of the declaration of the results of the presidential election, or in fact, at the point of going to the Supreme Court to file our petition against the presidential results, we only feel that it is fair for us to open the server that was used to transmit the presidential elections results so that we can see if truly William Ruto was declared the winner, because the evidence of the whistleblower is that he did not win the election. Secondly, we have seen an escalation of the cost of living in the country, and we had expected that our brothers in the current regime would at least retain the subsidies on food and fuel that had been in place by the previous regime, so that at least Kenyans do not feel the pinch of the harsh economic times that the entire world is going through. They took away those subsidies, and we haven't seen any reciprocal action that would result in a reduction of the price of food. So you know that we have an escalation of the cost of living. The prices of food are very high. The prices of electricity, just yesterday, they announced that they were going to increase the price of electricity by almost 60%. Luckily, there was a court order stopping the implementation of those new rates. They removed the subsidy on fuel, so fuel has gone through the roof, and it affects everything because we depend on diesel for transportation, for energy generation. And we feel that those subsidies should be put back in place so that whilst we wait for whatever programs the new regime wants to put in place to ensure that the cost of living goes down, at least Kenyans have something to eat as of today. And lastly, because of the regime's decision to go and essentially poach members of the Azimio coalition in parliament, they have managed to emasculate parliament so that they are passing through legislation that is very, very detrimental to the democratic interest of the country, especially on the reconstitution of the fresh electoral board, the IEBC. So those are our three, grievances that we need to be addressed. That in fact, first, we want the cost of food to come back down the way it was when we went into the election, and that can only be done by the return of the subsidies that were in place when we went into the election. Secondly, that the IEBC server that was used to transmit the presidential results need to be open so that Kenyans can know the truth about the result of the presidential election. And finally, that the process of the constitution of the current commission that will be in charge of the 2027 election be stopped for now until we have a bipartisan effort, so that we can have a body that will enjoy the confidence of both the opposition and the current regime.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sifuna, for clarifying that explanation, especially looking at the fact that the movement is indeed carried out by Raila Odinga and the coalition. But it is also mentioned that Mr. Raila Odinga, who has led day 3 of the anti-government protest, is seeking to have a share in the running of the economic affairs of the present government amidst claims of failed electoral process that saw Mr. William Ruto become the president, just as you've mentioned. But how true is this? That it's just more than fighting for the people. It's also about Mr. Raila Odinga too.
Of course, that is the narrative of the regime. Raila Odinga is not interested in sharing part of his government. In fact, we have told Mr. William Ruto that all he needs to do is to keep his promise during the campaigns to bring the cost of unga, which is maize meal, is a staple in Kenya, to below 100 shillings, and that will be the end of the matter. If we are talking about having a conversation on a bipartisan effort to put together the next electoral commission, that cannot be translated to wanting a share in government. Now, if he did all these 3 things, that in fact, if he was confident that he won the election, then we should have servers that transmitted the results open in a bipartisan manner, and we can have whoever it is, oversight the process of opening those servers, and everybody will be content. If indeed he won the election, it is there in the server. Our position is that based on the evidence that came out of the whistleblower's report, there is something in that server that will demonstrate that, in fact, William Ruto did not win the election. So it is not about Raila Odinga getting into government. He is not interested in a handshake. All Ruto has to do is to call a press conference today and say, yes, I am returning the subsidies, and the price of maize meal is going to fall below 100 Kenyan shillings, and say, okay, we cannot ignore half of the country. Let us have a bipartisan effort to put together the new electoral commission for the 2027 election, and that will be the end of the matter. We are not interested in anything more than those 3 items that I have spelled out.
But the Azimio Umoja's consistency in ensuring that this protest continues, and looking at the coalition of parties that are actually under these demonstrations, are you all sharing the same view, or are there differences? Because we've seen where protesters are starting to veer off and engage in other acts, especially while going out to protest. Is there any worry that within this coalition there seems to be a divide, or will there be a divide in between?
No, there is no division within the coalition. I think the decision to call for mass protest, because it was processed through the coalition's instruments, and it wasn't the first port of call, because you remember we have had engagements in the counties, in the constituencies. We had almost 20 meetings in the counties from coast to coast, and all those meetings were very peaceful. And we gave a 14-day ultimatum to the current regime to address those 3 issues that I have spoken to you about. They chose to ignore or, did nothing about it. And that is when we call for mass protests. And the only thing that is making this mass protest violent is police action. I am sure you have seen the videos from yesterday's peaceful procession that, in fact, proceeded for 2 hours very peacefully without encountering the police, and we were speaking to the people. And immediately we met with the police at a police station called Kware in the Embakasi South constituency here in Nairobi. We met with police violence. And what I want to say is that our protesters understand that our beef is not with anybody's private property. Our beef is not with anybody's family. Our beef is not with anybody's family holdings. Our beef is with the current regime. And that therefore we need to ensure that we are within the protection of Article 37 of our Constitution that requires us to proceed only when we are unarmed and we are peaceable, so that we enjoy that protection. The people causing violence in these processions are actually the police. And as a lawyer, I understand that any person who would invade somebody's private business or somebody's private farm is actually acting outside the realm of the protection of Article 37 of our Constitution. And that person is not a protester. That person is a criminal. We want to very strongly object to the negative comparison of the things that we are doing and the things that happened last week where people invaded people's private farms, cutting away animals. That is not a peaceful protester. That is a criminal, and it is a responsibility of the police. It is not the responsibility of Azimio la Umoja as a coalition to deal with criminal elements who decide that they are going to invade somebody's private farm. So for us, we are very clear that our protests are peaceful. And in fact, the one thing that is making violence break out in these processions is the presence and the actions and inactions of the police.
Well, talking about being peaceful, we've started to see that the protest is starting to equally become less peaceful, leading to deaths. There have also been attacks on journalists, by the way, and the police as well are saying that there are reprisal attacks because the protesters are equally coming to attack them as well. So there is a counterclaim in line with what you've also said. We've also seen an attack on a former president's farmhouse as well, where we saw fire and everything. Now, do you think that these protests will eventually come to a halt, will eventually stop when your demands, including the opening of the server, is met? Or are you not worried that it could spiral out of control, leading to something else?
First of all, it is a false narrative being peddled by the current regime that we attack the police. Police in Kenya are stationed at police stations and the barracks. If we wanted to attack them, we know where those barracks are, we know where those police stations are. But it is them who are meeting us in the streets. Like yesterday, they blocked our path out of Embakasi South constituency because we were going to go into another constituency, Embakasi East constituency, to address our supporters there. They are the ones who blocked our path with the water tanks and the tear gas, and they were shooting live rounds, including those attacks directed at members of the media. And the attacks on members of the media are very deliberate because the regime is very unhappy with the fact that many of the media houses in Kenya have decided to provide live coverage to what is happening. As a protester myself and as a leader of the Azimio coalition, I am only safe because of the presence of the media, because they would like a situation where their actions are not revealed to the public. Like yesterday, the regime has been absolutely embarrassed by the emergence of the video of police officers shooting tear gas canisters into people's vehicles, directly into private people's vehicles. And the injuries that have been sustained by the journalists, all of them, none of them is from actions of the protesters. All of them are from actions of the police and security forces. So we believe that for as long as we have this constitutional right, and in fact we have invited the regime, that if they have a problem with Article 37 of the Constitution, they need to bring an amendment to the Constitution to do it, to do away with it in Parliament. But for as long as that right exists, my brother, we are going to continue to exercise it until our demands are met. And our demands are very simple. In fact, I have said, if today Ruto stood up and said, yes, he's returning the subsidies and that the price of the maize meal is going to be 70 shillings like he promised during the campaigns, there will be nothing to protest over. If he says that, yes, we're going to have a bipartisan approach in constitution of the new IEBC, there will be nothing to protest over. If he can open the server, because if he's confident that he won the election, really there is nothing wrong with opening the server, and we will all audit the server, because it is a requirement of our law, our constitution in this country, that every single tool or method of election should be subject to public audit, and we don't understand why we cannot be able to access this particular server.
Anyway, there are questions as well concerning the funding of these rallies. And aren't you afraid that Kenya's economy could deepen, leaving Kenya or Kenyans in dire straits more than what they are going through?
Well, first, it is another regime lie that somehow the former president Uhuru Kenyatta is the one financing the current demos. As the senator of Nairobi, I can assure you, you do not need to fund any demonstrations in Nairobi, because we have a very big unemployed population in Nairobi. All you need to do is to drive out with your car and people will follow you, because they are happy that you are actually putting their causes on the table, that we need to create an economy that can actually create employment. What we are seeing the regime do is to create employment for their friends and their cronies and their tribesmen to the exclusion of everybody else. So we don't need money for a rally. All I need is a sound system, and you can see they are attacking our sound system, dousing it in water. Now I have to source for a new sound system for Monday because the one that we were using was doused with water and short-circuited. But for us, really, we want to say that we will continue with these protests, and they will continue to be peaceful if and only if you take away the illegal action of the police. These protests will remain peaceful.
Thank you so much, Senator Edwin Watenya Sifuna, for giving us this exclusive opportunity to speak with you in line with the current protests ongoing in Kenya. Thank you so much.
Having me, and I know you also have your own issues after the elections, but I think across Africa we must accept that the public and the people have the freedom to be able to express themselves, to be able to protest, and we shouldn't have regimes in Africa that deny people that opportunity. I am so proud of our brothers down in South Africa that it is the police who actually, lead the processions and ensure that everybody's property and business is protected. But we are seeing, an overreach of police power in places like Kenya, and of course, even in your own situation. And we just want to wish you all the best with your own situation in Nigeria.
Thank you for wishing us the best, as we wish you the best as well. Thank you so much for talking to us once again.
Thank you, sir.